Hey Glue Troopers, just thought I would knock out a real quick video for this evening. How do you like that new intro? Lou did that for me, my son. And we'll have a longer piece of music for the outro. A lot of folks had said that, 6-7 seconds, that's all you really want for an intro. Keep it short, and then you do all your fun stuff on the outro so that it would, folks just kind of want to get to the content of the video. As you can tell, I've just been outside taking out the trash, even though it had warmed up to the 40s today. It's gotten crisp again. So, the thing I was going to talk about tonight was just, we've all kind of acknowledged that model building is as much about learning stuff as it is building stuff. And this little Westland Whirlwind has been a good example of that. I had never even heard of some of these RAF bases until I was like, well, what paint scheme do I want to make it? And then you're like, well, it was at this base, it was at Matlask or wherever, and all of a sudden you run out to Wikipedia and looking it up, and you're educating yourself. And it's a thing that never stops. There's just, no one can know it all, but we can keep learning as long as we're around. And I have found that that is one of those little hidden gems about model building that probably isn't as much of a selling point as it should be. A lot of folks are really good about talking, about a specific model, but you learn so much more in general. For example, with the Impala, the Resonators. Of course, Steve of Steve's Model Mania had called me right away and told me what they were, and I kind of suspected it was something like that. And I was like, is that like glass packs? And he was explaining the difference to me. And then I looked at the comments read, and sure enough, a lot of the guys were telling me what they were and what they were about, and that's great. So I learned something about aviation, I learned something new about cars, and Steve and I kind of got into a debate about whether or not the Impala was a muscle car, and this is how you broaden your knowledge. And it's just great to know things for the sake of knowing them, even if you never really use them for anything. And of course, I consider this using it for something, but still, it's just a lot of fun. I've always been a curious guy. And people ask me, how do you know so much about these things? It's not in the books. Well, I've had the benefit of working with a lot of people, or getting to know some people who did a lot of these things. One of the great things about being a pilot, an airline pilot, is I've flown with a lot of guys who flew just about everything in the military. I've flown with guys that flew the Stealth and the F-15 and the F-16 and the A-10 and the F-14 and on and on. And I've learned so much from them. And it's just wonderful to get that first-hand experience, because it's great to learn something in a book or, in a kit model. You read the instruction sheet, it's got all this cool information, but you can't ask it questions. A person, you can ask questions, and you get a lot of the insights. How many of you guys knew that the CH-46 helicopter in the Marine Corps, its nickname is the Toad because of the way it sits on the ground? And I always loved that. Anyway, it's just that kind of thing. You learn the slang, the vernacular, where these things get their names. A lot of people don't know that the famous German Schwarm fighter formation, which is basically two elements of two, well, basically the U.S. Air Force still uses it today, but they just call it the fingertip 4. But it's more or less the same thing. And that was why the British used to fly what they called the Vic, which was a very tight 3-plane ship, but they all turned together. It was very difficult because everybody has watching the lead's really the only guy looking around, because everybody else is watching him. The inside guy's got to slow down, the outside guy's got to speed up. Whereas the German Schwarm, they all just turned at the same time, and they were spread out a little bit so everybody could look around. Eventually, pretty much everybody adopted it. But that's the kind of stuff, you learn talking to the Air Force guys, and like, oh yeah, we're doing the fingertip 4, which, is really just a Schwarm, and they're like, oh really? Oh, all that kind of cool stuff. The Navy guys talk about trapping on carriage, or learn all the cool stuff, and I don't care how good you are, how many times you've done it, especially at night, trapping on a carrier, that's got to get your blood pressure up. I imagine we've all seen that documentary where the old Marine Corps general is talking about they used to wire the pilots up during the Vietnam War as part of a test program, all these sensors, and the guy go fly a combat mission, they'd measure his pulse rate. When he came back land on the carrier at night, his pulse rate was actually higher than when he was being shot at. Because, hey, you can shoot back. But, big ocean, little ship. And so anyway, but that's one of the things about model building that I really think, if you're trying to get kids, parents interested in it, it's going, it's very educational. And of course, we all know about all the educational models that are out there, but you'll learn from models that aren't educational. I mean, No one's going to call the supernatural impala educational model unless you want to be a hunter. For those who don't know that reference, in Supernatural, the characters that hunted these demons are called hunters. Anyway, but I learned something from it just the same. So yeah, actually building a model car is, because they're so accurate inside, it is educational, because you put these parts, go, well, that's it, and then you get in the real car, hey, it looks the same, you know. Well, you know, they actually used to use models, often full-scale models, sometimes reduced scale, but they used to use models to teach people how machinery worked. So yeah, it's still educational, even building the hot rods and stuff. In fact, when I was in the Army, they had overscale models, like a 4-foot M16 that, you know, so the whole class could see as the drill sergeant pulled the parts out, you know, and you're sitting there with your little regular one on the table, but, you know, it's still a model. But instead of being 1-to-4, it's a 4-to-1, which is probably about 8-to-1. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of a cool thing, is that we should emphasize the educational aspect of models. And if people say, well, what about kaiju? Oh, but they are educational, because your Draculas and your Wolfman and your Godzillas and King Kongs, that's a good way to learn about the movie history. You know, you learn about people like Willis O'Brien and Bela Lugosi. And there goes my phone. You have a phone call. Hold on a second. Oops. Well, guys, I have been summoned. I must go to run an errand. Take care of yourselves, and as always, model on.